Oh, yes. A very good evening to you and welcome to Politics 101 Thursday night. It is day four of the strike, the teachers' strike, and we are going to be talking about that tonight, continuing our coverage of the teachers' strike. Day four, day four of the teachers' strike. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening to all of you. And I know that you have been following the so many um, live coverage of what's happening on the streets in Guyana. Thank God for social media. We are now able to get those things um, live as they happen. And so we don't have to wait until the news at night to get information. Information is now right there at our fingertips. Good evening. Please share the link. Tonight we are going to be talking with Vincent Alexander and Olive Sampson of IPADG. We are going to be talking about the strike. We're going to be talking about issues affecting African Guyanese people and looking at where we go from here. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to all of you who are joining us. Good evening to all of you who are joining us. Please share the link. If each of us shares the link, we are going to, of course, double, triple, quadruple those who are joining us. If you're joining us from Guyana, welcome, welcome. If you're a teacher, big up to you. If you are a teacher, if you were a teacher, if you're planning on becoming a teacher, big up to you. Big up to you. Good evening to you. If you're joining us from the wider Caribbean, a very good evening to you. If you're joining us from Trinidad, the Caribbean Union of Teachers have come out in support of the teachers in the Guyana Teachers Union, and they struggle for bread and justice. They struggle for bread and justice because that's what the struggle is for. It's for bread and justice, the right to a living wage, the right to live, the bread, and the justice is the justice for all citizens of Guyana. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening to you. Good evening to you. If you're joining us from the United States of America, a wonderful good evening to you. Whether you're joining us from Queens, New York, or Brooklyn, or the Bronx, upstate New York, welcome to Politics 101. If you're joining us from Connecticut or uh, Boston out there in Massachusetts, welcome to Politics 101. New Jersey, I know quite a few of you are joining us from the state of New Jersey. Welcome to Politics 101. How about you in Maryland? Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia, the tri-state area, Baltimore. Welcome to Politics 101. And of course, our friends down in the southern United States of America, down in the southern United States of America, in Georgia, in South Carolina, North Carolina, uh, Southern Virginia. Those of you who are joining us from Texas, welcome to Politics 101. Of course, our brothers and sisters down there in Miami area, down there in Florida. If you're joining us from Arizona, uh, California, welcome. And of course, those of you in the Midwest, we can't forget those of you in the Midwest, Chicago, Illinois. Those of you who join us from Ohio, welcome to Politics 101. And of course, our friends further north in Canada, we know it's this time of year, it's cold. All the North America, it's cold, but Canada is cold, and we hope the teachers are bringing some warmth into your lives. Um, Those of you who are joining us from Toronto area, Toronto, Ontario, welcome to Politics 101. I mentioned Montreal, quite a few of our people out there, Newfoundland. The Canadians have a funny way they call Newfoundland. Newfoundland is some Newfoundlander. I can't do it. When I was a boy, we say Newfoundland. Welcome to Politics 101. And good night. Good night to all our friends, our brothers and sisters in Europe, those of you who have stayed up to join us from the United Kingdom, from France, Scotland. Scotland, I know some of our people are there joining us from Scotland. Ireland, welcome to Politics 101. We're waiting on our guests. We're waiting on our guests. We're waiting on our guests. Vincent Alexander is joining us. Olive Sampson is also joining us. We're waiting on them to get going. Those of you joining us from Pennsylvania, I know my sister and friend, Miss Booker, Donnet Booker, is joining us from out there. Good evening to you, Donnet. Good evening to you. And good evening to all the bookers who are joining us, for viewers and listeners. We're waiting on our guests to come on. We're expecting Vincent Alexander to join us. We're expecting Olive Sampson to join us. They're going to be here momentarily. And once they're here, we're going to start the conversation. But it's day 4 of the strike, the teacher strike. And if you're a teacher, welcome to the program. And as we say, big up to the teachers. What a show of solidarity by the teachers themselves, but other sectors and sections of the population standing with the teachers. I think the government, the PPP, they were caught, as many of us were, by this show by the teachers. And, you know, I have been one of those persons who's been saying over and over again, you know, we are getting there. We just have to put in the work. Those of us who are the activists, those of us who call ourselves leaders, those of us who call ourselves influencers, you know, we have to do the work. Please share the link. Tonight is going to be a big night as usual. We're going to be a big night. We're going to be talking about the strike from an African Guyanese standpoint. We are going to be talking to the ITPADG people, give us a report. We started a fundraiser for them last week, and we expect that you would contribute to helping ITPADG. Thanks to those of you who have already contributed, but we are not very happy. We're not very happy that at the kind of response we've gotten to the call from ITPADG. I don't normally say that, but we're not very happy. We hope that you know, you're waiting for payday on Friday to make your contribution to ITPADG. But they're going to be here tonight to talk about the work that they're continuing to do. Good evening to you, Donna Liverpool. Good evening to you, Pam Hales. Good evening. And therefore, of the teachers' strike. We put in the work, we get the results. What we are seeing on the streets, what we are seeing with this strike is the results of work. That was taught to us by Frederick Douglass. Power concedes nothing without a demand. If you want to reap the rewards of struggle, you've got to struggle. You've got to put in the work. I know sometimes we get very impatient. We want boots on the ground. We want boots on the ground. What the guy needs people doing, they're not doing nothing. Blah, 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 blah. I know. And you all know that sometimes I got to calm you all down and said, this thing don't work like that. This thing don't work like that. Human beings don't work like that. We're not robots. That if David Hines or this body or Aubrey North or somebody said, get out on the streets, people will get out on the street. No. You all know human beings don't work like that. We got to put in the work. And we have been putting in the work. You've got to give kudos to the union leaders. They have been putting in the work. Consciousness is what leads people, to take political action. Consciousness is what leads people to take political action. You got to put in the work. And we have been putting in the work. What we are seeing on the streets, whether it's in Georgetown, whether it's in the Essequibo, whether it's in Berbice, what we are seeing on the streets, it's not something that happened overnight. It's consciousness raising over and over again, and it's tedious work. Sometimes you feel you're not making any progress, and then out of the blues, as we would say, something happens. I think the government was caught by surprise. They really thought that all they had to do was to threaten the teachers. In the first place, they didn't expect the union to go to strike. And then when they were caught with the strike, they felt they could bully their way and threaten the teachers. And that angers me a lot, because it's their, first of all, they don't do that to other ethnic groups. Gawu says they call a strike. They do not say to Gawu, your strike is illegal. They don't say to Gawu, your strike is political. They don't tell the Gawu workers, Gawu members, they don't take away their salaries if they strike. They don't deduct or stop deducting union dues for Gawu. All of this that they're doing to these teachers and to the teacher, they don't do it to Gawu. And they don't feel that they can fool sugar workers the same way that they feel they can fool public servants. And so they didn't believe that the union had the courage to strike. And further, once the union said that we're going to strike, they believed that the workers were going to turn their backs on the union. They really believe that. But what they're underestimating is the human capacity of our people. I mean, you cannot be talking about how much the economy is growing. And that is why some of us never deny that the economy is growing. We tell the truth. It is growing. We're not going to deny the government. We know it's not growing because of the government. It's growing because of the windfall we're getting from oil. So we know that the economy is growing, and that is why we keep saying it's growing. And when human beings look around and they realize that this thing is growing, and then you come with a 1.14 trillion budget, you confirm for them that money flowing, money there. And human beings, once they become conscious of that, then they're going to act based on that. The government is caught in its own doo-doo. You want to boast. You want to boast that the economy is the fastest growing economy in the world. $1.14 trillion, but you don't believe that human beings are going to respond because of that? And here is where we have to give ourselves a pat on the shoulder, because we continue to say, despite the bad contract, money still flowing to Guyana. The government still handling money, cash money. That is why we continue to say, yes, we are one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing economy in the world. And we wanted our people to hear that. 2 years ago when the IRI did a poll, it showed that very few Guyanese were paying attention to the oil and gas sector. They found that very few Guyanese were paying attention. But within a year or two, that has changed. And it has changed because some of us have beaten that drum. And our people now have the consciousness that you have money. And you cannot tell us, as Jack Dio now is trying to change the narrative about volatile oil prices. Yes, oil prices are not where we want it to be. But in the first couple of years, we got big money because the oil prices went up by 40 to 50% in the first couple of years of forest oil in Guyana. And we draw down. We also got money, unexpected money from the oil, the war, Ukraine war. The oil prices went up because of that, and we draw down. So yes, oil prices are always volatile. Prices are always volatile. But we draw down money from oil that we never expected. So Jack Dio can't come now and tell we volatile oil prices make you give teachers and public servants 6.5%. Well, the volatile oil prices did not affect how much you give to sugar workers, to fishermen and women, to rice farmers, all the concessions in the private sector, all the money that you're spending on infrastructure. The economists are telling us that 80% of this budget or more, but at least 80% is based on procurement, which means money going to people through contracts. 80% of the 1.4 trillion, 1.14 trillion. So we know that we got SARS. We know that we get paisa. And the teachers know that. And so the teachers came out and surprised the hell out of them and surprised the hell out of some of us on our side who believe that Guyanese are stupid, they're going to turn around and take blows and so on. And I said last week or the week before, I said, I hope when Guyanese start come out, some of us on our side don't run for cover. In spite of the threats, despite the threats. And you see how they're fighting sugar workers with all the might of the state. Police going in school, intimidating. What are policemen and women doing? Going and check who go to school and who won't go to school. It's a police state. The chickens are coming home to roost. Good evening, welcome to Politics 101. I think our guests are ready. I think they're ready. Vincent Alexander is here. Mrs. Let's see if Miss Sampson is here. I think she might be ready. It's that time. Let's go. Welcome. Please share the link. Good evening, Cheryl Sampson. Good evening, Abina. Is it Abina? Abira. Good evening to you. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to you, Richie. Welcome to Politics 101 on a Thursday night, day 4 of the teacher strike. It's good to be a Guyanese. It's good to be on our side of the political aisle. The work that we've put in, it's now showing dividends, consciousness raising. Let's bring in our guest. I know Vincent Alexander. Vincent, good evening.
Hi, good evening, David.
How are you?
Not too bad, just too busy.
Yes, well, I mean, somebody like you, you're wearing all the various hats. I don't think Miss Sampson is ready for us yet. You're wearing the various hats, you're GCOM man, you're not an active politician these days, meaning not an active partisan politician. I understand that you haven't renewed your membership and so on. But yes, we can understand you are in demand. Vincent, straight off, your reaction to this strike. It has just finished its fourth day, is entering its fifth day tomorrow. What are your reactions given all that you've seen in the last 4 days?
Well, I want to say I was listening to your comments, and the first point I want to make has to do with this argument of the volatility of oil prices. We are seeing that different standards are used for different people. When the question of the National Resource Fund and the ceiling being taken up is raised, that question is also factored in. We are told that the oil price is volatile, and because of that, that's one of the reasons why the ceiling has gone up and things like that. But then when we come to the wages for the teachers, we are told, no, volatility makes it difficult. In fact, the fact of the matter is, if we didn't raise the ceiling for the National Resource Fund withdrawal, then we would have the kind of savings that would allow us not to be in crisis if the oil prices goes down in relation to our current expenditure, because we can then go to the fund, and that's what the fund is for. The fund is to deal partly with the volatility. But if you drain the fund, then you are taking away your own capacity to deal with the volatile price. And you're being hypocritical when you say that you can't increase the salaries because of that reason, when in fact the mechanism that was intended to facilitate stability in salaries and so, you have interfered with that mechanism. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make has to do with the question of Jews. In Guyana, we had something referred to as the agency shop
Yes.
or the checkoff system. My understanding was that it was a court ruling that brought agency shop to an end. And therefore, what is happening in terms of monies being deducted is a case where the workers have indicated they would like a deduction to be made. It's not the agency shop. It's not every teacher who's paying a Jew. It is those who said, we want monies deducted and paid over to our union. And what the government has now decided to do is to not facilitate that. And that's a regular practice. It is done for paying your mortgage. It is done for a whole range of things, where people give the worker, the employer, an instruction that in preparing my salary, you can send so much to a particular place for a particular purpose. And so it has to be a case of vindictiveness that the government has decided no longer facilitating deduction. It's not the agency shop. It's not a question of the constitution and mandatory deductions. So we can see clearly that this is an act on the part of the government to try to break the union. In other words, the government is acting in contravention of our constitution, which provides for people to have freedom of association, for unions to represent people, and we are seeing that they are trying administratively to break something that has constitutional protection. So that's the second point I want to make. The third point I want to make is that this country is affected by what I will call insidious racism. Insidious racism. We know that the public sector, for historical reasons, is largely manned by people of African descent. And I'm being very careful here. It's largely manned by people of African descent for historical reasons. The PPP's attitude has always been that the public sector is parasitic and that the people who are worthy are the people involved in direct production. It's partly out of a Marxist issue of who produces and who doesn't produce. So that they have always seen the public sector as parasitic, uh, benefit of the labor of the workers, and have not been generous with the public sector. And I think that it is partly that attitude that is manifest in the way in which they're dealing with the teachers. And I call it insidious racism because it is affecting, whether we like it or not, people of African descent more than it's affecting anyone else. And so there is an insensitivity as to the constituency which is being affected by a disposition which seeks to say that the people who produce are the ones who should really be the beneficiaries, and the people in the service sector, the public sector in this instance, are really parasitic and the one who should not be taken into consideration as production goes up because they're not themselves the ones who are producing. Suffice to say, David, that in modern economics, we've gone past the argument that the productive sector, in terms of the production of hard goods, is the source, the only source of wealth. We have seen the role that the service sector now plays. And for that reason, even in terms of a definition of development, United Nations has gone beyond GDP, which is how much more you're producing, so to speak, and now factor in issues like services. Uh, what is the result of the education sector? What's the result of the health sector, and the service sector at large? So they are integral to production because the workers will not be able to bring to bear the skills for production if it was not for the education sector that equips them and for the health sector that keeps them healthy. And so we have to see things a little different from the original disposition which says, these people are parasitic. They're integral to production and should be considered in a similar manner in which those who are involved in the direct production of goods are remunerated and are rewarded. So those are the three initial points I would like to make. That we have a situation where on one hand there is insidious racism. It has to do with an attitude towards working people, in this instance in the service sector, that there is hypocrisy in relation to the situation with the volatility, because the fact of the matter is that the treatment of the National Resource Fund is a clear reflection that they are not preparing to deal with volatility in relation to wages and salaries which should be granted to workers. They are going into the fund in a manner that does not allow, when there is volatility, for that fund to be reverted to the stability in the public sector.
Thank you very much, Vincent Alexander, giving us his initial reaction to the ongoing strike by the teachers. We just finished day 4 of that strike, and it seems from everything we are seeing on the streets, from the reports from the union, that the strike has exceeded the expectations of even union leaders themselves. And from all intents and purposes, for all intents and purposes, it is it has been a successful first 4 days of the strike. Let us bring in our second guest, Olive Sampson, who is the CEO of IPADG, among other designations, because she's active in other organizations. Olive, good evening.
Good evening, David. Thank you for having us this evening.
And thank you very much for coming on. Your initial reactions to the teacher strike?
Um, my initial reactions are that they are, I think, they really make us feel proud for their discipline, their determination to achieve justice, right? Particularly, I guess, from the position that I sit as a child of a long line of teachers, and knowing that the importance that teachers have played in my life and their absolutely central role in our nation, in any nation. When we think to development, when we think of the future that we would like to see for Guyana, there's absolutely no way that we would achieve that without the work of teachers and the things that they're doing. And so that they care enough about their profession that they have not abandoned it, but that they would get out on the street and demand fair wages so that we can have so that our students will benefit because they will be able to put their all into what they do. I think it's very, very inspiring. When I think of it from in terms of the decade, one thinks of the decade mantra of recognition, justice, and development. And it encapsulates all of that. And even though our teachers are of all races, they're Amerindians and they're of East Indian descent and they're African Guyanese, um, the questions for us as we look at it are, how does this help to address how are teachers speaking to the issue of justice with respect to people of African descent? One of the other issues that I have considered as I've looked at this strike is the whole what has happened to the African Guyanese middle class, and how, because we have been, as Vincent just addressed, our involvement in the public sector as teachers, as persons in the fire service, police officers, in the army, etc., to the degree that we are not fairly compensated, our middle class is weakened and shrinks. And what happens as a result of that is also that we do not have the disposable income to support our civil society institutions, organizations that represent us, including our churches, including our engagement in Girl Guides and Boy Scouts and all of the other institutions that have helped to nurture and support us as a people. And so in their coming out, they're also taking a stand for the preservation of our economic status within the society and our ability to fund and support the things that are important to us. And as I pointed out, our churches, because if you speak to pastors, their churches are failing, not failing, but they're certainly not as robust and thriving as one would wish, because the persons who attend churches, the congregations, don't have the funds to make it. And so, what I think that the teachers are doing is noble. I think that they are making sure that the sanctity of the strike, the sanctity of labor rights, are being protected, and that is critical.
Thank you very much, Sister Olive, and giving us your initial reaction to the teacher strike. I As you notice, my head was down and I was reading a news story just flashing here by Demerara Waves, where Vice President Jack Deal has said that the GTU cannot account for dues collected, and they have not presented an audited report of their funds. Now, the two of you would be familiar with that. Now, for me, the IPAS, every time an African Guyanese led organization, they always say that they can't account for money. The way that chap, so I pass black people. Just anyhow, I am the host tonight. I'm the host tonight. Olive, since you're on the floor, are you surprised that at that coming from Jack Deal?
Actually, no. I had hoped to listen to the press conference today just so that I could hear the vice president's messaging,
Yeah.
how he would come back at what is clearly a very successful strike. And I am not surprised. This has usually been the tack that he has taken with respect to our community. And what I want to say is that, you know, we, on the other hand, are aware of the huge issues that this government confronts with respect to really taking care of the finances that are put at its disposal as the of the state. And one immediately remembers what happened with the $214 million that was due from Exxon that was suddenly became $3 million, and one person got a slap on the wrist and we moved on. Right? So the government itself has not shown itself to be the steward of our resources that we would wish. So, constantly attacking Black people, criminalizing us at every turn to make the case that Black people are criminal and that we are irresponsible. And that trope, I think, has been overdone, and it's quite ineffective. And so that he chose to go there is not surprising, but
Vincent?
Jagdeo has no moral authority, period, to talk about finance. No moral authority. He has been in charge of a government where there's still outstanding issues in terms of Carifesta and accounting for the money, in terms of World Cup and accounting for the money, and a whole range of areas. Jagdeo has no moral authority to talk about accountability. Absolutely not. But having said that, one always has to consider his timing on these matters. His timing. If it is true, is it yesterday or last year?
Mm-hmm.
Why no?
Yeah.
Why no? I am not at all suggesting it is true, but I'm saying that he finds it convenient in an attempt to discredit people to throw in this question of accountability and financing. I would go on further to say that those teachers who are out there, who are on strike, that's their business.
Yeah.
That's their business. And I'm quite sure they're capable of looking after their business, just as they're looking after the business of calling for wages and salaries which are due. And that all we are seeing here from Jagdeo is his normal disposition to try to discredit people when they have a credible matter at hand. You can't discredit the strike. It's beyond being discredited. So you're now trying to discredit the union. But he has no credibility to discredit the union. This is the same man who attempted to discredit Ipalaji. First of all, attempted to say that we were misappropriating the money. I mean, it's unbelievable. This man sits in government. His ministry takes the parliament, estimates submitted by Padaji. They're approved by the parliament. His government disburses the money. And then 2.5 years after, come to say that we're spending too much on a certain line item. Which line item was factored into the proposals approved by his government. This is it's unbelievable what we had been subjected to in terms of the dubious nature and the dishonesty of what Jagdeo calls is only the politics. That's the term he applies to this kind of behavior. And I'm saying this with personal experience. I had once to confront him on things he had said and done as he attempted to smile with me. And you know what the response was? It's only the politics. Jagdeo has reduced our country to simply politicking and dirty politics in pursuit of control.
Well said there by Vincent Alexander, responding to Jack Deo's press conference, in which he said that the teachers' union has failed to account for union membership dues. Vincent, I like your response. That's the teacher's business, whether it's true or not. And we are not here saying it's true, but that's their business. And of course, he continued, according to Demerara Wave, to say the government cannot afford it. The government cannot afford it. We have dealt with that. Vincent,
the government cannot afford what?
Cannot afford to pay the wages that the teachers are asking for.
You know, may I just respond
Yes,
to that?
yes, Olive, you have to
I'm struck by that because you, in your monologue, as you opened the program, you spoke to the fact that the budget, 80+% of the budget is devoted to procurement,
yes,
right? Procurement of services, etc., right? The government has this economy has a serious problem with absorptive capacity, right? The economy cannot really absorb anymore. We have not been able to build the roads, the schools, fix the pump stations, all of the things that were supposed to be done, we are unable to do them. We don't have the absorptive capacity. So truly, in allotting that huge amount, that huge percentage of the budget towards procurement of more infrastructural projects, etc., we are looking at failure. We are looking at a crash, the inability to absorb. So it is really easy at this point to take the corrective action and to do more human development, because human development is the foundation by which you increase absorptive capacity.
Olive Sampson, CEO of ITPADG, Vincent Alexander, chairman of ITPADG. Brother Vincent, Sister Olive, while we have a captive audience here of hundreds tonight, I want to pivot. We're going to come back to the teacher strike, but I want us to pivot now and to talk a little bit about ITPADG. We have been giving ample coverage to ITPADG on this program so that our people know what ITPADG has been doing. The withdrawal of the subvention is well known. In the budget, the subvention is there. Last year, they did what they wanted to do with it. They did not give it to ITPADG. This year, the subvention is there. There's no indication that they are going to turn it over to ITPADG. Yet you continue to carry out your mandate. You continue to do the work. And I think that is instructive, because what it shows is that you are committed, first of all, to do the work. To do the work. The subvention that was in the first instance given by the Grange administration was really a small gesture to the Ipadagy, and to the recognition by the United Nations of the decade. It was by no means any kind of money given to Ipadagy to go do this and to do that and all of that. It was a small gesture to really facilitate the larger mandate of the United Nations. And so, therefore, the fact that they've withheld the subvention and you've continued to do the work, I think, is a clear indication that your intention is not to grapple government money, as we would say in Guyana, and to do your own thing. Is that there is a facilitation that you are doing on behalf of the more than 60 organizations that are affiliated with Ipadagy. And so I want you to talk a little bit again about the work that you continue to do and why that work is important and why that work should continue. We started to do our little contribution here in Politics 101, and some of our viewers have answered the call and they've made donations to help you to continue to do that kind of work, because we feel that we should not allow the government to stymie Ipadagy's work, because that work is so important to our community. So, Olive, I want to start with you. Have you been able to continue to operate at the same level as you operated before when subvention?
Yeah. Well, first of all, David, if you don't mind, I'd like to pause at this moment to just say thank you. I want to say thank you to you for being so passionate in your request for support for Ipadagy, and to thank your viewers who have contributed, and for those who actually contributed via online mechanisms, but actually two persons came to our office as well and brought donations. And so we just want to really express our appreciation to you and to your viewers for your support. It's truly needed and very, very much appreciated. We have not been able to keep up at the same level, and I'll give you an example. One of the critical projects that we have continued to support, but not at the level that we'd wish to, are two night schools that we were supporting from 2020 because they had existed prior to the change in government. At the change in government, the funding was stopped. One of them is in Sophia and the other is in Kildonan. Both are programs to help persons who were not able to finish high school for whatever reason, people who needed to get their CXCs, people who wanted to enter UG but needed to get English and math, just giving people a second chance. These are second chance learners. And we supported, so the subvention that the government said did nothing to help Black people went to part of it went to support those two night schools from 2020 on. Since our subvention has been cut, we have tried to raise funds, and we have kept up sending whatever we can to those two night schools. We have written a proposal that we've submitted to an international organization to seek funding, because we want to make sure that young people who are showing an interest in wanting to go back to school, to prepare for a career or to be in business or whatever it is they choose, that they have that chance. And so the night schools are critical. And I'd like to just make a plug to this listening audience for their support for the two night schools. Our support to them when we had the subvention ran at about 440,000 Guyana dollars per month. It's not really a full payment for the teachers, it's a stipend. These teachers have continued to work even without being paid because they're committed. But these are young people with families. They have to feed them. They have to find their transportation to and from that night school. And you know, I don't know, some of them may have to pay someone to help take care of their kids while they're doing that. I'm not sure, but they do have their expenses. We're grateful to them. And I want to say that while we're on this show, to those teachers who in Kildonan and Sophia have continued to work, we need to make sure that they are paid. So that is one thing. We have done a lot of work over the years with organizational development, working with organizations to help them so that they can build their capacity to run an efficient organization, an organization that can ultimately be prepared to seek grant support anywhere. So they would have been registered. They would have you know, minutes being kept, bank account, all of the things that really build strong organizations. So we continue to do that. We held such a training program. We held two training programs of that nature over the last 2 weeks. We worked with business persons and last year, and we will continue to this year. We have a training program that will be coming up soon to be announced, where we helped business persons similarly building their business development, how to write a business plan, record keeping, all of the things that help to build a strong business. We've tended to work with micro and small businesses in that way and have trained hundreds of small businesses. In addition to having persons, when we had a staff, persons who would come into the office and we could sit with them one-on-one and help to write a proposal, help to write a business plan, help them to with their SBB application, the application for Small Business Bureau registration was very complex. We would help people. So our staff provided services to the African Guyanese community and continues to do that. Even now, we have a skeleton staff, and that staff has continued to provide the kind of support to the business community, etc., that we had in the past. I think we may have lost David. I don't know, Vincent, if you'd like to add
Vincent,
anything.
is there anything you would like to add there?
I
Um,
think
the first observation I want to make, I have a document here,
Hmm.
Budget 2024 at a glance.
Yeah.
In that document, under Culture, Sports, and Arts, is an item which reads 100 million to support activities associated with the observation. I repeat that, the observation of the International Decade for People of African Descent. The very word observation tells a story. The United Nations has declared a decade that's intended to redress historical deficiencies, wrongs, absence of recognition, absence of justice, absence of development. And here's the government in responding to that declaration, which went on to say that what is required is institutional and legal rectification so the people of African descent can come to the table equally. Here's a government referring to that task of refashioning your institutional framework, of legal reform as an observation, observance, as an observance. We're not into an observance of a decade. We're into work of a decade. And so the very use of the language of observance tells you a story of a disposition of the government to a declaration and a resolution which is signed on to. And therefore, it is not surprising that we given 100 million, which our understanding was intended to establish a secretariat that would then work with the people for the purpose of empowerment and would interact with the government for the purpose of institutional and legal reform. That was the purpose for which the money was given. Under no circumstance could 100 million be considered a sum sufficient to be given out meaningful grants to organizations. Bearing in mind that meaningful grants do not necessarily address the question of institutional and legal reform. You could get a grant, you could do a project, but if the legal framework in the country doesn't change and the institutional framework doesn't change, the people remain in exactly the same position at the end of the project because the environment, the equitable environment for equalization still would not have been put in place. And so we need to understand really what has happened in terms of this decade. This decade has not been treated as a period when there's supposed to be reform, change, enhancement, and betterment. It's been treated as a period when you can probably have some handouts, make people feel nice, but they remain essentially in the same socioeconomic condition that they were in at the beginning of the decade. Suffice to say that given 100 million in comparative terms also shows that you're not serious. You know, for Heritage Month alone, the Amerindians are getting 147 million. Heritage Month.
Month.
Africans are getting, and we got a Heritage Month in August.
Yeah.
We are getting 100 million for the year. I'm not saying the Amerindians should not get 147, not contesting that.
Right.
I'm just showing the level of seriousness attached issues related to the African people. That you can give them 100 million and then tell them that they must have a proper secretariat. Because if you go to the Amerindians again, you will see they have a secretariat, and it's far more than 100 million their secretariat. But we mustn't have a secretariat that gets 100 million. We mustn't have the manpower in place that can then work with the community. We should get this money and share it out in grants, which turns out to be chicken feed if you're going to share it out as grants and not impacting our community the way in which the decade intended our community should be impacted. There is no program the government has developed in relation to the people of African descent as is required of the decade. And as a consequence, there's no report that they've submitted to the United Nations as is required of them as signatories. They have not even attended the forum. When the forum for the permanent forum of the people of African descent assembly in the first instance, government was absent. The second forum, they were again absent. They then went to United Nations, where the General Assembly met to defend their non-action and to contend the people of African descent are on the same level with others, and therefore there is no need for special action. That is what we are faced with. But as has been said at the inception, we are soldiering on with many of our people being volunteers. The people who they accuse and attempt to say they want big salaries, but that in itself was a mistake. Between the coordinating council with Padaji, which does not benefit in any way from any monies that Padaji gets, and the professional staff, those people who are being paid were not the people who designing the programs. They're not the representatives of the people of African descent. They are professional staff. The representatives are volunteers who have continued to volunteer, and hence the work of Ipatagy, though scaled down, has continued because there are people who, in the face of vilification, have been prepared to volunteer and to keep the work going.
To keep the work going, Vincent Alexander. The picture you're looking at there on the screen, it was a picture taken shortly after President Granger announced the subvention for the setting up of the Secretariat at the annual Coffee 250 State of the African Guyanese Condition. It was at that annual conference, I think it was in 2016, that he made the announcement. And as he was leaving, he stopped to speak with Vincent Alexander and myself and Sister Kamika, another member of Coffee 250. And his words to us is that you all have to make this thing happen. And we did make it happen. The Secretariat was set up, and today we have it part of G. And it has really made a contribution to the work in the African Guyanese community. A picture tells a lot. It tells a lot. He challenged us. Not only made the announcement, but he challenged us. As we say in our community, God bless David Granger for his insight, because when he made that announcement, he made the observation that the decade had started and we hadn't done anything substantial in the African Guyanese community. And as the president, he aligned this government with it. And he didn't set up and control it. He made the announcement and he said to Vincent, Kamika, and myself, you all have to make this happen. A difference in the approach to governance. He didn't seek to control it. He said, you all have to make it happen. Sister Olive, let me bring you in back. There are things that you all are doing, albeit a scale down, and you got bills to pay. You need resources, you need funds. Please make a pitch to our audience, those who have not contributed. Please do.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yes, we have bills to pay. That is absolutely sure, because we have to maintain our secretariat. In order to get the work done, you have to have a space in which you work. You have to pay for internet. You've got to, have security, lights, and phones that where people can call. So we do have that. And but in order to do, for example, the training program that we will have coming up shortly, we have to be able to produce, to print documents for handouts. We've got to have the kind of support that will help us to make sure that those programs that we are continuing are supported. Our youth committee, for example, is doing work with in the communities with books that have been donated to Padaji. We would like to be able to share those books, to engage with young people in communities, to encourage greater literacy. We, as some people may recall, that we conducted a huge sale, Ujama, in an exhibition and sale on Main Street in July of 2022. We had almost 100 small businesses represented there, and so we're hoping that we can do that again this year. That sale is preceded by training programs for those persons who come out there, so that they understand how best to market their produce, how best to price it, how ideas about agro processing, etc., and so and improving their products. So we would really value the support so that we can have that event again, because when we created that space, that marketplace for small businesses to come out, they were able to expand their markets. Some of the comments we got were, wow, we didn't know that there were that many African Guyanese doing these kinds of things, a range of things, from catering to the production of clothing to just a wide range of businesses were represented there. So that is one of the big projects that we would like to be able to, once we have completed this business training that we're doing, we'd like it to have the kind of meaningful follow up by providing a marketplace for the participants in the business training. We would also like to continue our work with farmers and persons who are doing kitchen gardens. Um, just as government took our subvention, we had gone out and offered seedlings to organizations, persons in communities across the country. We were able to complete that project and provided seedlings to persons who were able to start kitchen gardens or replenish them to contribute to their farming and their production. We'd like to be able to continue that project because it's a way of ensuring that people have good meals they can afford. They have vegetables that they grow in their yards, and they can not only grow for their families, but also, you know, excess they're able to sell and increase their income. And so we had taken from the subvention to do that. Just in June of 2022, we concluded some of our organizational development training. As I mentioned, that training included helping people to get to the point where they could apply for grant funding from any institution. And one of the first places that we created an opportunity for them to apply to IPADG. So we set aside some of our subvention so persons could apply for small grants. And we awarded grants to those member organizations to do things, to do a range of things, to work with children. One of the projects had to do with how do you help students with conflict resolution. They were going to use puppets and other theatrical experiences to help students to deal with conflict resolution. So that's one of the things we funded. We funded several of the organizations who were going into poultry rearing, and some of them still do. We were not able to conclude that funding, but it is beneficial. They're small grants, but we would like to rebuild that grant fund so we can make small grants and make a difference in people's lives. And these are generally for communities. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. And then to continue our advocacy work, our educational.
Before you go on to advocacy, I want to suggest you also speak a bit about the youth activities, the investor ton that we used to have, and the other youth activity where we were trying to help young people to get involved in business and help young people who are already involved in business. I'd like you to speak to those two.
And before Olive, before you go there, let me just make the pitch here. You have the things on the screen there, the Cash App, the PayPal, the Zelle, the PayPal and Zelle are the same. Please, while you're listening, you hear where your contribution would make a difference. Please make your contribution. Please make a contribution to Prodigy, no matter how small. No matter how small, of course, no matter how large your contribution is, we would welcome it. They would welcome it. You're hearing from Prodigy officials here, the top officials, what they are doing. What they're doing. We would like to thank those of you who have come through. I've gotten a receipt because I passed over what we have raised, and Sister Olive sent me a receipt, a general receipt today. So we are passing, and they're using it day to day. Please make your contribution. One dirty build and wash on, make and come clean. This is we story. This is we story, and we got to keep our story. We have to show the government, as the teachers are doing, that we can be self-sufficient. Yes, we are not going to solve our problems because we belong to a state. And the state has to contribute because we contribute to the state. And the state has a responsibility to our welfare as a people. Yes, but there are things that we can do to supplement that. And especially when they're sticking their fingers in the eyes of our people, it is time we stand up, especially those of us who can afford it. $5, $10, $20, whatever you can afford, please contribute. Sister Olive, back to you.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you. The chair was asking about the really excellent, this is an outstanding program that we conducted 3 years in a row, where we gave young entrepreneurs an opportunity, not just a one off kind of one day, but we put out a call for young entrepreneurs, either who were in business or wanted to start a business, had a business idea. And they would submit an application to participate in what we called Investathon. The Investathon, the successful applicants were, and they normally we kept that number to about 35 to 40. That's at the first level. They would have an opportunity to meet with mentors, business persons, successful business persons who would spend time with them looking at their business plan and helping them to refine it, really grilling them on, what are you thinking? How are you going to achieve this? Here's something that you need to really focus more attention on, really getting the kind of one-on-one, hands-on assistance that any young business person really benefits from. And so from that initial pool, they would go on to the second stage where they, through a competition, the judges decided who could go on to the finals, and they'd make their pitch to a panel, and the winning businesses, the winning entrepreneurs got prize money. The first prize was $500,000 Guyana dollars, and we always started off with three prizes, and those business persons being so impressed with the quality and the creativity of these young business persons contributed. So we gave sometimes five prizes for them. I want to point out there's one that, and I don't want to benefit one over the other, but I know that, for example, there's now a product online for a cooker price that's, a quick cooker price. You can get the package and boil. That's one of the persons. Another one was doing drones and drone photography and supporting surveys and so on with drone technology. Another young person produced feed for chickens and other livestock. And so those young people not only had the opportunity to engage, to be mentored, got prizes to support their businesses. The prize money that they received, they had to say specifically what they were going to do with it. And we worked with them to procure whatever it was. So we didn't just turn over $500,000, but we, went with them, purchased whatever it was, or paid for whatever the service was that they needed, etc. So we know that the money went towards their business development. We would really like to do that program again because it was so valuable. We continue to advertise youth entrepreneurs and others, but young entrepreneurs on our website. One day a week, it focuses on young entrepreneurs. On Fridays, we reach out and we advertise for the entire African Guyanese community, business persons who send us their information. We plug it on our Facebook page. We plug it into on our Facebook page, but we continue to do work with we would like to be able to continue that. That project with the Investathon was always tied to a youth conference. So this entire competition and the presentations were in front of a larger audience. And you, David, recall that you spoke at the last one because we wanted young people to understand that business is not new to African Guyanese, because somehow or other this kind of mantra is out there about Black people and business. But we have always been business persons. We have always been business persons. I always point to what we did in the purchase of the abandoned plantations, the creation of villages, and the setting up of those villages and enterprises within those. And all we need to do is to look across the Atlantic to West Africa, to the vibrant markets that are all across Africa, and the vibrant economies at the local level. I mean, the images of Africa as poor are, again, a part of that entire propaganda that is continually spun to shape our own thinking about ourselves. But we wanted, and you did a presentation that helped persons to really understand our history as business persons. So we don't want that to lapse. We would like to continue to do this project and to ensure that the youth are. And Vincent, you had said one other thing. I'm sorry. What was the other thing
We
you
had
wanted?
the business exposed well to the young people.
Yeah, we did. We had for the youth
Invested on the
conference.
expo.
Yeah, at the youth conferences, we had the Investathon and we had a marketplace where young people were asked to come and set up and be able to not only exhibit but sell their produce. And that has always been had excellent turnout. We held it one year even at the Arthur Chung Conference Center, and persons were be able to exhibit there and at the Theater Guild. This project started online during COVID. So during COVID, we also had an online program called Spill the Facts. And so as part of Spill the Facts, we did several programs in the run up to that where we had young business people on talking about this upcoming thing, but also encouraging their audiences through their own experiences about getting into business and how to do it. We did a business expo online where we paid for young entrepreneurs to have their advertisements done. The video, we had an arrangement with a videographer and created ads for young entrepreneurs. They got those ads, but they also had an opportunity at a venue to pitch to a larger audience. So when the vice president speaks to a Padaji not spending the subvention to provide for the African Guyanese community, I think that what he would have liked to see is us to dole out little bits of money all across the community, not build capacity, not strengthen our communities. And that is what I think really bothered him, because right after we had that amazing almost 100 businesses on Main Street, where we cleaned Main Street ourselves, right? Set up an amazing space, immaculate, well organized 2-day exhibit. Within a month, less than a month, he got on his press conference and maligned our institution. But I just want to make a personal note at this point. We spoke earlier about the commitment of IPADAG's coordinating council, the chair, others, the staff who come into work not knowing whether they'll get whatever little we have to pay them. They have to put gas in their cars. They have to, buy lunch, take care of whatever their living expenses are. But the commitment, the commitment to the struggle. And on the personal note that I wanted to say, I have had a long history of this struggle. One of the first jobs that I had in the United States was working for Dorothy Height, a civil rights leader and head of the National Council of Negro Women. I worked for that organization. I understand the Black struggle from many perspectives. And one of the things that I know is that my ancestors stood up and fought, and that is what is expected of me. So every day I get up and devote 12, 15 hours a day to the work of IPADAG, and I don't have to be paid for that. What the payment from me is the triumph that I know is on the way.
Vincent, you have the last word, my brother. I know it's hard to
Wow.
follow that.
The fact of the matter is that the Padaji came out of the African Guyanese community. We're not a top-down organization. We're a bottom-up organization. Our leadership comes out of a bottom-up process. We have been subjected to the kind of meetings and annual gatherings where our leadership is elected or re-elected. And we're really an organization that has been responsive to the needs of the African Guyanese community, with the leadership being essentially people who are paying back, who are volunteers. Our CEO, for example, is a volunteer, and I mean, the value could be attached to our CEO is, she's a volunteer. All of our coordinating members are volunteers. We have not mentioned tonight that we've started a credit union. That credit union is alive and it's growing, and people are also encouraged to come and join the credit union. The office is based on North Road, so that's a service we granted, and that will be a legacy, a definite legacy of the decade, the credit union which we reformed. And I could say people are already, though it's a small credit union, people are already accessing little loans from from that credit union. Our work is to embrace the community, to help to lift the community, and what we were getting to, the time was not allowed, was to interact with government so that the environment, from an institutional and a legal perspective, could be rectified in keeping with the Durban Declaration and the International Decade Declaration, so the people of African descent could find an equitable environment for their growth and development. There are things about our history that have to be addressed. We have to be addressed. How our backlands are dealt with has to be addressed. There's no question about that. So that we can be more meaningfully involved in agriculture. How we can access resources for industrial undertakings has to be addressed. There were attempts in the past, the Mortgage Finance Bank, the Agricultural Bank, to address those issues. Those institutions no longer exist. We have to get back to those institutions because they are essential to creating the kind of environment that will allow us to come out of the problems that we face with. Not to forget that the African people of African descent have suffered a trauma from the historical experience. We also have to do work to overcome that trauma. The Hebrew family has been spearheading to some extent that work, reaching out into the communities to raise our consciousness of our being so that we can look inward as we attempt to look outward to do things for ourselves. That trauma too has to be overcome. There is denial, even among ourselves, but more so beyond us, that trauma has to be rectified.
Vincent Alexander here tonight, along with Sister Olive Sampson. And I can tell you about the commitment of those workers. A couple of months ago, I went into the secretariat there, the office, to drop off a contribution from one of our supporters here on Politics 101. And those ladies in there, although they hadn't received their salaries because Ipadaji was in dire straits, they were talking to me about issues that I should raise and discuss on Politics 101. They weren't talking about their circumstances. They hadn't received their wages, their salaries, but they were talking to me about issues that affect our community and our country and making suggestions to me about what we should discuss here on Politics 101. That is what you call selfless work, sacrifices on behalf of our community. Sister Olive, Brother Vincent, thank you all very much for coming on.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you for having us. Yes.
Thank you. And please go to Cash App, PayPal, Zelle, Those of you, I'm glad some of you in Guyana made it down to Georgetown. Go to the head office there at Ipadaji and make your contribution. We've got to keep this thing going. We've got to keep this thing going. The strike is going to enter day 5 tomorrow. We're hoping to get somebody from the teachers union to come on tomorrow night. Maybe Sister Coretta McDonald, we're not sure. They're all so busy, but we're hoping to get somebody to come on tomorrow night to give a kind of review of the week 1 of the teacher strike. Continue to support that strike. I see parents are out there, all kinds of support. I'm so proud. I'm so proud to be a Guyanese. I'm so proud to be a Guyanese, and we all should be proud. Not because we want our people to hit the government. No, this is not about hitting the government. This is about standing up for our rights. This is about teachers standing up for their rights, standing up for their families, standing up for their students, standing up for their communities and their country. This is what it's about. This is not about hitting the government. The government is about hitting teachers. But we shall overcome, as they've been singing on the streets, the teachers. Solidarity forever. The union makes us strong. At a time when in the big capitalist countries, we see a resurgence of trade unionism and the rights of workers to bargain through their unions. We saw President Biden going on a picket line with workers. And when they did a recent poll among Americans, Americans are saying that trade unions are among the more important organizations in our society. And if that can happen in the bowels of capitalism, what about our country, our Guyana? The union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Our workers must get their due reward. And those who are spreading the nonsense that the teachers don't care about their students, about the children, how can you say that when these teachers, they work in the worst conditions? Their schools without air conditioning, without fans. Toilets are bad. And yet those teachers, many females, males, they're males, but many females working in those conditions. How much more can human beings take before they say enough is enough? And enough is enough. Let us support our teachers. When our teachers win what they deserve, the entire community, the entire country wins. We continue to stand with our teachers, all of us, wherever we are, whether we are in Guyana or outside of Guyana. Play our part. Play our part. Play our part. This is what we have been calling for. Militancy on behalf on behalf of our community. Militancy by the sufferers, those who suffer every day. Militancy on the part of those who make the sacrifice. Our teachers have to eat, they have to dress. They can't go to school looking anyhow. They have their own children, their own families. And that $45,000 that they give, the teachers have to spend it on the students, the children, not themselves. Not themselves. So that $45,000, and it's not going to the teachers. And if $45,000 were given to teachers, what can $45,000 do? We in the Working People's Alliance say, pay the teachers a living wage. And on top of that, give each household in the community, give each household in the country a cash grant, a universal basic income. We pegged it 6 years ago at 1 million Guyana dollars, given what we are earning, given the reserves that we have, we are upping that amount past $1 million. Give the teachers a living wage and then supplement that wage with a basic income, with a cash transfer to each family. The time has come. The time has come for that. Yes, you have money, Mr. Jagdio. Stop lying. Stop lying about volatile oil prices. Stop lying. Guyana got more than it expected. More from oil than it expected. You can afford it. Give the teachers what they deserve. We expect nothing less. And we will accept nothing less. The struggle goes on. The struggle goes on. Because it is out of struggle that progress comes. It is out of struggle that we get our material and our spiritual rewards. We are people too. We are people too. Teachers are people too. Teachers are people too. They are human beings. Our foreparents have sacrificed tremendously in our country. $1.14 trillion. That is not penny money. That is not 3 cents money. 80% of it is going to go in procurement. That is, they're going to use those monies to steer resources to their friends, their families, and as the opposition people say, their favorites. We have to break the back of that. The teachers are leading the way. The rest of us must support and follow. Until tomorrow night, walk good, walk good, sleep good tonight, wake up tomorrow. And if you have some time, turn out, whether it's in the Essequibo and Regina, in New Amsterdam, in Bobis, on the Quarantine Coast, West Bobis, in Georgetown, ground zero, ground zero. Go out there and lend your support. Put your bodies as a barricade against the onslaught of a mindless, heartless government. You're fighting your teachers. And you say you care because you care. If you care, would you be deducting money from the teacher's salary because they're standing up for their rights? Because you care? If you care, would you be refusing to deduct monies that the teachers are asking you to deduct for their union? Because you care? Because you care? If you care, would you be sending policemen and women into schools to intimidate? You don't care. You don't care. You don't give one damn. And if a government doesn't give one damn, you fight that government. Fight it with all your might. Fight, fight, fight.